Okay, time for another game review, and we're going to look at a 1988 Mastertronic game, so one of the later releases in the later style packaging. Goes by the name of Motorbike Madness. Just going to get that loading. And for a slight difference, it is something I've done before, and I'm going to do it again here. I'm also going to look at the Amstrad version of the game, which has exactly the same style packaging, apart from little subtle differences. So I'm going to take a look at the Commodore version first and then do a comparison to the Amstrad version to see if that's any better or indeed worse. Here's the front cover of the game then. Pretty straightforward. Not much effort gone into this one. It's a picture of a bloke on a motorbike and it says Motorbike Madness. Say no more. Spine as expected. Back cover. We've got a bunch of Spectrum screenshots. And bit of info there. Race against the clock in this challenging 3D trials riding simulation. Beat the clock and become the best biker on the mountain. Inside we've got lots of info, none of which is very relevant, I imagine. Tells you what the challenges are. Falls and crashes affect your machine's handling. Amazing stuff. And inside it continues. Blah 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 blah. Prize money. Yada yada. Get used to the controls. It's a downhill race. There's no backtracking. You only get one attempt at each hazard on the way down the hill. And there's the controls and the loading instructions. And of course a bit of French, German and Italian instructions as well, and unsurprisingly that is it. Here's the title screen of Motorbike Madness then, and as you can see there it says Motorbike Madness, copyright Mastertronic. Not many options there, play game or define keys. I'm going to be using the joystick so I don't need to do that, and as you can see there it says it's a binary design production. No music on the title screen. You can see this big status bar at the bottom of the screen, and that stays within the game, which we'll get started now. So the idea of the game is that you're a motorbike, as you can see at the top of the screen there, on a very green background. And the idea is you've got to get to the bottom of the screen and do as many sort of stunts or tricks over the various obstacles as possible. You're going down a mountain, so once you go downhill you can't go back up again. That's what the instructions say anyway. It's an isometric perspective, as you can see. Looks like the graphics have all been ported over from a Spectrum version because they're all monochromatic. So for example, you can ride over a beam like that. You can ride over Volkswagen Beetles as well. There's no way of actually negotiating all the obstacles in one run. You have to sort of pick and choose which ones you want to attempt. I'll choose none of those in fact. Let's go down a bit further down. Control is just forward to accelerate, back to brake, and left and right move you left and right, as you might expect, but it's a bit strange. That beeping means the score's going up, as you can see at the bottom there. There is also a time limit for the level. The problem with the controls is that left actually moves you left on the screen, so I'm pushing left now and it's rotating me left, pushing right rotates you right, which might seem alright in principle, but the sort of de facto standard for any sort of overhead view racing game is that left makes the bike go left, and because I'm facing down, when I push left I expect the bike to go left, which is that way, based on the way I'm facing, and that takes some getting used to say the least. To the point where I've had 5 or 6 goes and I've still not quite got to grips with the controls. So there's another little sort of rickety bit that you're supposed to walk across there, or drive across I should say. The graphics are really unappealing, they're really rather ugly, not just because they're Spectrum ones, but the graphic of the bike's unpleasant. Given that this is a Commodore 64, this for example I think is water. They could have made that blue. They could have made some of the ramps brown so they're a bit more visible. Half the time you can't even see what you're looking for. The sounds are also very basic, just a pretty run-of-the-mill engine noise. and I'm actually doing quite well on this, much better than on previous goes. These I think are logs that you're supposed to drive over, but who really knows? All I know is you'd have to drive down the middle of them. And I'm scoring quite nicely at the moment. So yeah, the graphics are really ugly, the sounds are really basic. There's no reason why they couldn't have put a bit more colour on it. So when you crash, as I've just done, for no discernible reason, you do go back to the last checkpoint, which aren't obvious, but obviously it was just a little bit further up the screen, as you've seen. So I've got to try and get to the bottom of this course. See, I don't really know why I'm crashing there. As you can see, each time you crash, part of your bike lights up red, and that means that you're sustaining damage. Let's try and go through this thing. Everything's got to be sort of pixel perfect going across these things. Again, I don't know why I've crashed there, but I do know I'm getting rather annoyed. Let's try and go over this one instead. That looks straight onto me there. There we go, finally got over there. And this is another beam coming up, but you can barely see it because it just blends into the background. It's really annoying, and that's the only way to get across here. So, although I could nip around here instead, actually, and just skip that beam. You never really get any speed up because you have to go over the obstacles fairly slowly. There is a little sort of network of flags there, which I nearly crashed into. Oh, I seem to have gone through the landscape there as well. Yeah, it's a pretty ugly and generally not very fun to play game. It's obviously trying to replicate Kickstart, but in an isometric perspective. I've gone all the way back to that checkpoint again now, which is very annoying. Obviously, I think my feelings about isometric games generally have been well documented on previous videos. The isometric perspective, save for very few examples, like for example Head Over Heels, really doesn't work for me in any concept, adventure game, shooter, and definitely not in a driving sort of game. It's just, when you have to be so precise to go over the obstacles, it's just too difficult, and doesn't make for a very enjoyable game. You take it in comparison to Kickstart, for example, which is really fun to play on a two-dimensional side view. No problems with actually going over the obstacles. Put that in comparison to this, where you're having to pick your way through at a snail pace just to get over things, and there's really no comparison. So I've got over some more logs there, but basically I'm nearly run out of time. So you actually got to do this at speed as well, which is just kind of ridiculous. I've got no idea how much further I've got to go. Let's just try and get over here. There doesn't seem to be any end to this thing. Oh, and I've crashed again. And I've got 28 seconds left. And it sent me all the way back, not quite as far as last time. Let's just quickly try and drive over this Volkswagen Beetle. There we go, over the Beetle we go. Let's try and go over this ramp. No, I'm not going to make it over there. No, I've crashed. And that's game over. And I got a high score, which I don't really care about, but you can put your name in on the high score table. So all in all, pretty dismal stuff. I have improved at it dramatically since the first time I played, where I could barely get past the first section, but I've got no desire to get further in the game. It just isn't any fun really. It's kind of slow and boring, and that will do. So that's what it's like on the Commodore 64. I'm now going to load up the Amstrad CPC 464 version and see if that's any better. So I've got the Amstrad version loading up now, as you can see, Amstrad on the desk. So let's have a look at the packaging just quickly. As I showed at the beginning of this video, the packaging is pretty much exactly the same logo, same packaging style, same picture. This is one of these flippy tapes, so you've got the Spectrum version on one side and the Amstrad version on the other, which just suggests what the quality of the game was that Mastertronic didn't really want to waste one tape on one version. And otherwise it's exactly the same screenshots on the back from the Spectrum version, and I'm not even going to bother going inside it because it's all exactly the same inside there as well. So one thing we have got over and above the Commodore 64 version is a loading screen. Nothing much to say about it. There's a motorbike going over the bonnet of a Volkswagen Beetle. Why is it always Volkswagen Beetles that get used in these motorbike, motocross type games, whatever you call them, trail riding? I'm sure it was those kind of cars in Kickstart as well. Anyway, for whatever reason, there it is driving over there and the game is loading. So here's the title screen of the Amstrad version, and what you probably can't tell from the video is that this play area takes up approximately, I would say, 6 by 6-ish inches on the screen. There's a good 3 or 4 inches of space either side, and 2 or 3 at the top and bottom of the monitor. So very high resolution and small playing area. So you can see the title screen pretty similar to the one on the C64. It tells you who actually wrote the game on this one, Gary Hughes, and otherwise pretty much the same. The display across the bottom is a little bit different, and obviously we've got an abundance of blue rather than green. So let's get the game started. So the layout's pretty similar to the Commodore version. In fact, it's almost identical in terms of the layout of the obstacles. The first thing you'll notice is that they're quite a bit easier to see because all the obstacles are yellow on the blue background, so good contrast there. So that's a plus point. Driving's pretty much the same, except pushing down now makes you accelerate instead of pushing up. The left and right still move you left and right on the screen rather than moving the bike left and right based on the direction. But that actually makes it a little bit more intuitive, and you could even turn the joystick the other way around if you wanted the usual sort of style controls for a top-down racing game. So that's pretty good as well. There you go, just driven over a VW Beetle there. So basically the concept's exactly the same. You drive down, try and negotiate your way through along the objects. But here's one of the big differences. You crash quite easily, but you don't actually go back to any checkpoints like you did on the Commodore 1, so you can actually make your way further down the level without having to go back and do everything all over again. That's quite good as well. In most cases, I found that you have to drive over those things quite quickly, whereas on the Commodore version you drove over those slowly. So generally speaking, it's actually a little bit better than the Commodore version, I would say. Control wise it's a little bit better, but it is ridiculously hard, whereas the Commodore version you could actually negotiate some of these obstacles quite easily. Here, if you get stuck in the wrong place, you just keep dying over and over again. Like, I don't know what's supposed to go on there, but that's game over. So it is way harder than the Commodore version, albeit with a better overall presentation. What I did find out, and I'll just go again, quite an interesting development and shows some rather bad collision detection, is if you just point downwards and drive straight downwards, you can actually drive over all these obstacles and pick up some points without actually tackling them properly. I just drove over that thing slightly. Then when you get to the end you do have to then stop, being a bit more sensible. That does let you get down the course quite quickly and pick up quite a few points. Unfortunately, driving across that's particularly difficult when you've come to a standstill. So I would say the Amstrad version is marginally better, but I've got to say, regardless, it's a pretty terrible game. Still doesn't really work for me in the isometric perspective. Controls are a bit ropey, and I would say it's not really worth $1.99 when you think it was released in 1988 when a lot of substantially better games were on the market by then. It's too easy to just get stuck and lose another life and not being able to correct yourself because you don't actually respawn a bit further up the course. So no need to play it again. that will sum that one up. Hope you enjoyed something a little bit different with the comparison at least, and just proof there that Commodore 64 isn't always the best version.
If you only knew the power of the dark side.
2, 1, 0.